Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the We Built an Empire podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Wolff. In today's episode, we interview a dear friend of mine, Eric Nelson, owner-operator of Wild Oak Capital and host of the Real Estate Mindset podcast. So without further ado, let's get to it.
Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah.
Mr. Nelson, how are you?
Kyle, man, I'm good. Thanks for having me on. This is an honor to be here.
Oh man, no, it's my pleasure. I've actually been looking forward to this one since you signed up. I gave you a shout out in yesterday's recording. I actually had another guest on, but I kind of owe a lot to you letting me come on your podcast. And I was talking about it yesterday. It was just when I just pretty much vomited my entire story. I walked away from there just A, all jazzed on energy, and B, it was just like such a huge weight off my shoulders. And then there was the panic. I was like, oh, I don't even know if I've told my mom all of that, like maybe bits and pieces, but it was such a relief and very therapeutic. And, that single moment and then going up to your event in Denver that you invited me to, talking to people that had heard the podcast, it was like light switch. It was like, I got to do this. I really enjoy it. It's great for me in a bit of a selfish manner to talk to people. It is therapeutic for me. And I definitely gave a shout out yesterday, and I thank you for coming on, because I think single-handedly you pushed me over the edge to start a podcast of my own. So I owe that to you.
Well, first of all, it was my pleasure to have you on my show, dude. I get we have a lot of mutual friends, right? So people who will reach out and be like, hey man, listen to Kyle's show. That was super powerful. And it was like, you were honest and open and real. It was an incredible podcast. So yeah, I can't take credit for you, obviously starting your show, but I appreciate the shout out. But yeah, that was my pleasure, man. That was a credible show. So I guess if you can, I don't know if you guys have show notes or whatever, but maybe toss that episode in there if you want to for your listeners to listen. But it was an amazing podcast for sure.
Yeah, if you're okay with that, we'd absolutely love that. So you kind of mentioned we obviously we know each other on a personal level a bit. We kind of had a big swing of maybe we didn't talk to each other for a decade, but sort of came back into life and the Durango world. And I've been seeing what you guys have recently been doing with your investment portfolio, and it looks like you guys are just moving mountains, man. I'm pretty impressed with what you guys are doing in such a short time. It's inspirational to see what you guys are doing. So, I mean, why don't we start there? I really want to, because obviously we'll put it in the show notes, but your podcast is heavily around investment strategies and mindset towards real estate investing and things like that. But I wanted you on here because I want to know your full story, because I do believe that you kind of only ever know a sliver of one person's life, and you kind of get your side of the friendship version of what that is. And so I wanted to just have you on here and just kind of know more about you as a person, as a member of your community. And so, but I do want you absolutely to talk about, some of the investment stuff and what you guys have going on right now, because I think it's pretty damn amazing. So.
Yeah, no, first of all, I'm standing on the shoulders of people who helped me and sort of guided me, right? So certainly don't take any credit. And I ask the question on occasion, I'll ask people hey, what do you think gives you your success? And prior to asking that question, I asked the question, what is your definition of success? And so the best and coolest answers I've heard from people is oh man, it's due to the people around me, due to mentors ahead of me. And I think the reason that I like that answer so much is because it resonates with me. What we've been able to achieve is cool, and I'm excited about it. I'm happy to kind of dive into details, of course, but it's only to say thanks for mentors and my wife and all the other people around me and our teammates and stuff. And my assistant Kristen, she's not even an assistant, she's a superstar. I send her something and she does it 10 times better and faster than me. So just an example of people around me really kind of created that success. So I'll dive into a little bit if you want, but basically what we're doing is buying multifamily properties, like apartment buildings, and we do what's called a syndication. So we bring a group of people together with what I'll call like achievable amounts of money, right? So like our minimum investment is $25,000. So the average person can be like, okay, I can actually wrap my head around that figure. It's a lot of money, but if you're in your say 40s, you may have that amount of cash sitting around. You want to invest somewhere, right? Whereas like if you want to try and buy an apartment building on your own, it's like no one has $2 million in cash, So it's a cool strategy because you can bring a bunch of people together, pool that money together, and then buy an asset. And so that's what we're doing, is buying apartment buildings. And then essentially what I like to say is like, it's like a long-term flip. But I think what separates us too is we put a huge emphasis on the tenant. So like a lot of landlords, they're just kind of cash flow heavy, right? They're worried about the cash flow of the bottom line. And I think that's fine. There's nothing against them. But our style is way more like tenant based, right? So we want to build a community. We want to build a better place to live. So when we talk about CapEx or capital expenditures, money spent on the property, we're like, what would make this a cooler place to live, right? And so we do a community events. We give kids back to school stuff. We like do Christmas parties for them, like, stuff like that makes it a cooler place to live. And then we ask around, like ask the tenants, hey, what upgrades do you want? Here's an example is like, we just closed on one in Little Rock and people were like, yeah, we could all use new countertops. Cause what they've done is like epoxy the countertops instead of actually replace them. We're like, done. So basically we have a plan to replace literally every single countertop in the entire complex. This is 60 units. Yeah. And so we worked a deal with a vendor where they will store all the countertops, and as the leases turn, or as tenants say, yeah, you can come in and replace them while we live here, we'll cruise in there and replace the countertops. It's just an example. So all that to say, yeah, we've closed on 300-ish doors, 304, I want to say, in the last year, which has been a pretty wild ride.
I'm laughing, but that is for the people that don't know, like that is a massive feat. And that's why I said earlier, like feels like you guys are moving mountains. Cause I mean, I know just, from knowing you on a personal level, like it did take a year to kind of maybe get that first one like under your belt, but it's like, I feel like watching you guys pull the trigger on the first one, it just, I mean, you had already had and experienced all the headaches through the first one. So you knew what to expect on the second, and it's like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like, I mean, that's a mass quantity of doors to be under management. And like, my hat's off to you guys. It feels like to me, you're doing it with honesty and integrity. You're not just trying to snatch up things that are just class D and, just ruin the current tenants' lives, and just like you said, be worried about the cash flow, right? You're building it.
Yeah, we'll ruin our lives, man. They're property. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I appreciate that though. Like, yeah. And it is like a big, it's a lot of work, right? So like, but the behind the scenes is the like for Shane, for example, poor guy, man, he underwrites, I think we're averaging around 300 properties reviewed for every property we buy. So like, it's a lot. And I mean, he's fast, super, super smart dude. You can kind of tell if a property's going to work in a 15, 20 minute period, but like, it's just a lot of time, energy, and money really spent. Cause we go to the markets that we're buying these things as well, go tour these things. And sometimes they don't work out. We've had a handful under contract and they fall through. Once you kind of go in person, you're like, yeah, this is not what we thought. Or, truthfully, sometimes sellers just don't disclose the truth. And so, our number one priority is our investors, maybe behind the tenants, but we'll say 1 and 2 as investors and tenants. And if it's not something that we think we will be proud to own, and if we think it's not something that we can make money on for the investors, then we got to walk. And so it's a pretty wild ride for sure. And I appreciate you talking about it, because yeah, it's a lot of work to lead up to it. And I think that's like what pushes people away, is there's a solid year of prepping and understanding and education and stuff before you, in my opinion, before you really want to like jump into the syndication world. Because, I kind of alluded to this, you're dealing with other people's money, you're dealing with investor money, and you got to take care of it. I always say, like, I'm way more scared of their money than mine. Like, I'll lose my money and be bummed. Mm-hmm. If I lose someone else's money, I'd be crushed,
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And I can kind of speak to that though. Having personally called you, looking at one of the portfolios, maybe 2 or 3 ago, I sorry, I haven't, I don't know exactly, but there's a bunch of them. But we were looking at it, and I was like, I text you and I'm like, hey, my wife and I would we like to just kind of talk to you about this. And you're like, yep, it's like Sunday at 10. And you're like, hey, let's hop on 20-minute call. And I mean, the first thing we said, like, look, if it doesn't feel right, then don't worry about it. Like, no sweat off my back. You're still going to be my friend. Like, if you don't feel comfortable with this, then don't do it. So it's not a pressures game, which I really appreciated that, and it's still like, we had the opportunity, we had something else come into life, and it wasn't the right time and model, but it wasn't you guys. I can't speak for the other partners, but I know you personally, there's zero pressure. It doesn't feel like you're a carpetbagger just trying to get, somebody's cash to just make this investment. You're honest. And with every single person, I imagine that you're treating them exactly the same as you treat me and Simone. So,
yeah, I mean, you guys are special. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. I mean, of course, like you're a good friend of mine, but it's like that with everyone. Yeah, it's something I say, and I do think we could probably, get more investors. Obviously, if we were more like salesy and pressury, but like absolutely not my style. And then I can speak for the other guys; it's not their style either. It's like this. Actually, it's interesting. I kind of hate the term raising capital because that's what it's called in our world. It's like, okay, go raise money for this deal you have, and that's not really what it is. It's actually like showing people an opportunity because the returns are pretty solid and the risk is, it's always there. Right. But as far as like other vehicles are concerned, in my opinion, it's a pretty good place to put your money. It's a tangible asset. You own a portion of a property. So it's a pretty cool place to put your money, in my opinion. So it's kind of like providing a lot of people an opportunity they wouldn't have ever seen or had, because it's still a little bit, what I'll say is a little bit of an unknown world for investments. I mean, most people are familiar with like 401ks and, IRAs and stuff, but a lot of times it just lands in the stock market somewhere and you don't have a ton of control. In this sense, you sort of get to pick, one, the property, because we'll tell you all about it. You can even drive by and check it out. Right. But two is it's just, the people operating it. You can call me. You can say, hey, what was going on with this? Or, hey, and of course we'll send a monthly update. And I'm not trying to pitch it on your show, man. That's not the deal. But I'm just telling you.
No. It's good. I mean, people that listen to this they know that I'm a real estate agent. I do want them to know what you do. And I'm not like, we can't talk about this shit. It's not happening. Like, stop it. No,
but it's true. I'm not like trying to sell people. I just think it's the point of the story of all that to say was like, it really is a cool opportunity. And if it's not the right time or a fit for someone, that's what I always say. It's like, no sweat, man. Like, maybe another one, maybe a year or two from now, you'll see another one come up that we're working on that fits. And if never, then great. Like, you and I will do plenty of business. We'll have plenty of beers. It doesn't really, in the long run, my friendship is way more valuable and important to me than any of that stuff.
Sure. No, that's awesome. So, I mean, I know that you're an engineer by trade, and, you went to college for that. You did, at least from what I've heard on the podcast and other conversations, you had kind of a slew of single family homes or even some duplexes for a time there. What was the big shift for you to get away from that single family model, as far as, was it driven by hassle of tenants, or is it scalability? Was there something else that drove you outside of this? Why? Because I know they're the same, and I've listened to a lot of stuff that you've sent me, and read this book, but I still do think that it's a large flip, so to speak. But on a scale sector, it's gigantic. And when I hear you sometimes talk about it, it almost gives me anxiety, being like, "Whew, that's a big leap." And I just wonder often, like, what was the real driving factor that moved you from the single family duplex, triplex world to going after something on the scale and magnitude of an apartment complex?
Yeah. I mean, if you're cool, that I'll kind of give my backstory, because I think it'll paint the picture better than just answer the question. Right.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
So here's kind of the whole story. Is basically in college, my brother and I, this is Matt, who, we were, living together and just paying rent. And I was like, dude, like, I was working a summer job. So I was working an internship. So I was working 40 hours a week, making decent money as a college student, working for an engineer. And I was like, hey man, I've got a little cash. I mean, at the time, like, not much, but this is 2007. And, I was like, hey, why don't we just buy a house and rent it to our friends rather than pay rent? And he was just out of the military, like just back, from Iraq, and was like, yeah, dude, I got a little bit of cash too. Let's make it happen. And so we bought this monster house with like an unfinished basement. And, you know, like lending back then was a joke. Like I gave him like 2 weeks of a paycheck and like, yeah, cool. You make some money. Here's your loan. Like just, I mean, that's part of why like it all fell apart, right?
Sure.
But we had no business with that loan is what I'm trying to say, but it all worked out. I mean, we never missed a payment, but anyway, so we did that. We bought this house. We kind of like house hacked, right? We didn't even know what we were doing. We like finished out the basement, which is kind of a cool learning process in general, because I had no true construction experience really, other than doing concrete, right? Mm-hmm. So we finished it out and we did just that. We rented to our friends like at a cheaper rate. It was kind of a fun college house. And we weren't paying rent because our roommates were paying all the rent and was covering the mortgage. So I kind of got a little bit of a bug for it early on, right? And then after that, you know, I met Marie, who's my wife now, and we traveled a little bit, moved around a little bit. Then we finally landed back in Durango and we bought our first house. And then shortly after that, I was like, man, we should really buy another rental property. Like we should buy something, right? So we actually partnered with her parents and split this like rental property down the road. It was on 4th Ave. And like knowing what I know now, it wasn't necessarily a great investment. Like the rent did cover the mortgage and then some a little bit, which is pretty hard to find in Durango. Mm-hmm. But, you know, it wasn't like amazing, right? But I learned a ton. And so when we ended up selling that house, we pretty much gave all the proceeds to Marie's parents as a thank you because we just didn't make that much money. Mm-hmm. But a friend of mine who you maybe know, his name's Shane, he tipped me off. Shane Siegel. He lives in Durango as well, but he tipped me off on Bigger Pockets. He's like, oh, go to this site and check it out. And like a lot of people, that's sort of like your like Genesis moment, kind of like, oh, there's math to this. And there's actually like a business behind this, right? So we had been sort of saving up cash like with this in mind. So we ended up buying another rental. And then shortly after that, we moved into our current house, which we still live in, which is a triplex. And we got it with an owner finance deal. So she financed and that's a whole story in itself. So then we had a single family, a triplex, and then we ended up buying one in Texas because I wanted to try like out of state because I'd been hearing a lot about that. Bought a single family in Texas, which actually we still own. And then this is the coolest story ever. It was like I was walking my son, who was a baby at the time, down the street, and basically every for rent sign in Durango, I would just call and say, hey, like beautiful looking house. I see you have a for rent sign. I'm not looking to rent, but would you sell it? And I got hundreds of no's, right? But I was learning about the market. I was learning about rents. I was learning how landlords worked. And eventually I walked up on this sixplex and this gentleman was outside. He was there and I was like, hey, how's it going? And he honestly looked like kind of defeated, like he'd just been worn out. And I was like, I said the exact same thing. I'm like, look, I'm not looking to rent. It's a beautiful house. Is there any reason, like any way you'd sell it to me? And he's like, yeah, I think I would, but you might be surprised at my sales price. That's kind of how he'd say it. Mm-hmm. I was like, well, maybe I won't be, like, what are you thinking? And we didn't really even talk numbers the first time. I was like, you know what, think on it. Think what your sales price would be. Can I give you a call like next couple of days? So I called him back and he's like, yeah, I talked to my wife and we'd sell it, but we need $1 million. And I could tell it was like, which $1 million is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. But
sure,
in Durango for 6 units, $1 million right on 3rd Avenue was like immediately like, oh, actually this has some legs. Like, let's talk. And then I said, well, here's the thing is my wife and I, we don't have a ton of cash and we want to save what cash we have to put into this property. So is there any way you'd sell or finance for a really low down payment? And he's like, what does that mean? So kind of walked him through that thing. And again, I was like, all right, talk to your wife, think on it. So we bought a sixplex for $1 million with $30,000 down, which is basically pretty much all the money we had in the world. And, to your point, like at that time, that was, dude, I'm like every night laying in bed awake, like $1 million in debt. Am I doing the right thing? This is so crazy. Yeah. So I would call all the people I know who I, trusted. I was like, here's the deal. Here's what's going on. The rents are super low. Here's what my plan is. And everyone I knew who like had been kind of doing this was like, yeah, sounds like kind of a crazy good deal. Like I would go for it. And Marie was super supportive, man. She was like, do you trust yourself? Do you trust the numbers? Like, do you think you can do it? I'm like, I think so. So we bought it. And yeah, I mean, to answer your question, like tenants are kind of annoying, but generally speaking, actually, I don't mind it at all. Like tenants will text you and say, hey, my X is broken, right? Like my
Yeah.
furnace or whatever. I got a couple of really, really good doozy stories of shit breaking that sucked.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I installed a new boiler in that house, dude, that nobody in town would work on. Because
Really?
it was like, yeah, like literally no one. I called every plumber, and I'm in the trades. I know everyone, but everyone's like, no, I'm not touching that. So I literally had a boiler shipped from Minnesota, and like had some friends help me carry it down the stairs, and I installed this boiler that I didn't know anything about. And it was a crazy story. So I had these tenants, and of course it was January, so I had like 1,000 space heaters going all over the place. Mm-hmm. And to get this thing here and rush, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so to answer your question, like I had at one point 11 rentals that I was managing here in Durango. Mm-hmm. And it was not that big a deal, but like when they would turn, you'd show it 4 or 5 times and people wouldn't show. And it was just kind of a lot of time and a lot of texting and a lot of fixing. And so I got to the point where I was basically like, either I can kind of sit right in here, I can have maybe 15 rentals, let's say, and cruise with that, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with, or I can like see what else is out there kind of. And so a friend of mine was running the meetup that I now run, and he moved away, but he's still my coach to this day. And he was like, I think you should think bigger, because he's like, from what I can tell, you're out of money. You're a little tired of this landlord thing. Like there are other ways to make money in real estate. So he's like, just kind of encouraged me to look a little bigger, but it took some pushing, like took some serious effort on my part to like get outside of that box. So it was kind of a long process, but eventually what I decided was, okay, we're going to sell off some of these to get some cash, because it does take cash to do syndication. I mean, people will sort of say that it doesn't, but it does. Sure. Plus, a lot of people want to see that you have skin in the game. So I want to invest in my own deals too. But anyway, so we ended up selling a few and making a little money. The market's been pretty good to us over the last 10 years. So we had some cash from selling some of those. And then I realized, to your point, like there's some scalability. So like you have a 60 unit and a person moves out, honestly, not a big deal, right? But if you have a triplex and one person moves out, you're 33%, vacancy. So it was just kind of one of those things where it sort of just made some sense for where I was, for my skill set, for where I wanted to go. So to take the leap took a long time and a lot of like soul searching, I guess. But I'm glad I did, because it is a little bit more suited to my style. And I will say, like, I wouldn't take any of it back. Like when people talk to me now, like we put on an event, you touched on that. Like at the event, people, they want to jump straight to syndication. Like I want to go like big and far as I can right away. I usually, depending on the person, but I usually kind of discourage that. I think most people should buy a single family or a duplex or something. And if at all possible, be the landlord. Because you learn so much. You learn so much about just tenants and what it's like to be a good landlord, and what it's like to, collect rent, what it's like to like get punched in the gut, if you need a new roof. Like you realize you have to have capital reserves. Like all those things are true that you hear, and no one's necessarily special. I mean, everyone's sort of susceptible to those things, like kind of hitting your pocketbook, right? And so I usually encourage people at least own one rental before you kind of dive into the bigger world. That's my opinion. So kind of a very long answer to your question, but
no. I think it gives a lot of context to it. I mean, I was moving it a little quick, but I think it's because, like I have listened to a ton of podcasts and the things that you've recommended me. So it's, in my head, it's, I know some of these things, so it kind of jumped a little bit ahead, but going back to your situation of owning single family, it does, I think, I guess you don't have to, if you want to be a passive investor. There's a lot of people that are doing that in the syndication world, right?
Yeah, and I think those are different, honestly.
Yeah,
I mean, I think it's kind of a different realm, and we can touch on that too. But go ahead.
Yeah, but I was just saying, I think owning your own, being the landlord in a good situation, a bad situation, a terrible situation, it lays the foundation moving forward. I think like you're going to get the fundamental knowledge of how quickly it can go to shit. Or, how, and also looking at investments. Like, I think I've called you a handful of times on properties, be like, what do you think about this? Like, and it's usually like, Like, and I'm like, really? I mean, and it's like, what I get on the other end, like the silence sometimes that doesn't come after my second question is like, it's you being like, dude, relook at the numbers. Like, you already know, Kyle, that this is not going to work. You're asking me to reaffirm what you already know is in existence in your head. It's like, this is not a good investment, and so I think that I already know that. I'm looking for somebody else to tell me, no, this is terrible. So I feel like I didn't have to make the bad decision to Simone. Like, hey, I know we thought it was good, so it's like, I'll be like, well, Eric said it's terrible. She's like, oh,
I'd love it, dude.
Yeah.
I'll die on that sword for you. That's
I hate to use it like that, but no. So I mean, it does give you that fundamental knowledge to look at and assess certain investments, and really ask yourself, like, would you do this with your own capital? Because when you're messing with somebody else's money, it's a completely different scenario. So it's like, if you're investing into this with your own dollars, whether it's $20, $50, or $100,000, are you going to put your own money at the fear of potentially losing your own cash? And so I think when you buy that, if it's you and your wife or you and your in-laws or whatever, it gives you real life experience towards a potential massive failure. And so I think that there's a lot behind that. So,
I think one more thing, like, before we move on, is like, I think people buy something, like, let's say a single family, buy a rental, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they think, okay, it's just one single family. It's just one thing. I don't need to necessarily treat it like a business, but like, one thing that you'll hear over and over and over is treat it like a business. And I will tell you, I struggled with that because, like, a tenant would, like negotiate rent or something, like, that's a bad example, but maybe a better example would be like keeping track of books and having a really clean bank account and, like, just really tracking everything, even though it's a little bit more work, it's always worth it. So, like, the one other piece of advice is, if you're going to buy a single family, which I encourage everyone to do, if at all possible, is track it, man. And really have a separate account, like, totally different deal, maybe even buying an LLC. There's pros and cons to that, but, like, just treat it like a business 100%. And even when you're talking with tenants, like, hey, this is a business. Like, we can be friends after this conversation, but, like, for right now, I'm your landlord, and I'm not a jerk, but I'm going to do the best I possibly can for the both of us. So that would be another piece of advice before I move on. Cause that's something, like, especially in a small town, you buy a house and then pretty soon your brother's living in it, and pretty soon they're not paying rent. I mean, it's just better, in my opinion, to, like, kind of separate it if at all possible.
Sure. Yeah. There's got to be some separation there. I would think that would be hard. And it is hard, and it's the worst. Like, I will get off this topic here pretty quick, but we sold that place in Texas, and that was our last single family, and the market just rose to our 10-year exit strategy. And it was like, we need to capitalize on this right now. And I think our tenants had just finished their 1-year lease, and maybe they were month to month. And so they had called me, and, we want to do month to month. We're building this house up in, Vintage Oaks, which is just north of New Braunfels, Texas. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. You guys have been great, no big deal. And then it was like, our realtor calls, and it's, it's the 4th or 5th conversation. And she's like, no, seriously, if you want to sell, now is the time. Like, we will go under contract the next day. As I talked about it with Simone, I'm like, and so I had to have that conversation with these folks. And I was like, we're going to sell the property. And they're like, you just said last week that you weren't going to sell it. And I was like, I know I did, and I'm sorry. And I feel like not only am I failing you guys, but I'm failing myself with being an honest person. But at that time, I was not going to sell this property, but I can't run the risk of you guys being in there for another 10 to 12 months and the market potentially shifting. I have to capitalize for the betterment of myself and my family, first and foremost, above, your wishes and desires. And it was brutal. Like, we put it on the market, it was a classic thing, like, hey, we've got pictures next Tuesday. Can we please have it, like, show ready? Like, and they had, like, cat litter on the countertops. Like, the photographer shows up, like, I can't shoot this. And I'm like, have to call them, like, what's going on? So it's like, so as a landlord, it does, you have those moments where you kind of, unfortunately, even if you're trying with all of your power, you do kind of have to be the jerk. And it can be a little bit rough. Yeah. Ultimately, they moved out early, which was great, because then we got the photographer back in, and we did go on a contract the very next day. So it's like,
that's incredible,
it worked out. But I do wish those people the best, and it was a really hard conversation. But at the end of the day, I mean, it put my family into a better situation. So but
Yeah, it's so funny too. Like things come back around. Like we had this one tenant they were amazing, like the best tenants ever, and they had to break their lease. And she called me and was like nervous. Obviously, she's like, "Hey, we found this other place, and I know that we're breaking our lease. I'm so sorry, and we'll pay extra rent." I was like, "No sweat. Like
Yeah.
life happens. The lease is there to protect both of us, but don't worry about it. Like if you found a better place for you, move on."
Yeah.
And honestly, that's exactly what happened, because it's in Durango. I'm like, I can find another renter. I mean, not a big deal, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you
So
put a
now
sign in
it's
the window.
funny, like years later, this is like 2 years later, they're now really good friends with their other friends. We're at their house, and she like confessed to me. She's like, "I was so nervous for that call, and I couldn't believe how cool you were."
She's been
And I was
holding it
like-
in all these years.
Yeah.
Like, oh, she's probably talking to her other friends. Like, is he going to be there? Oh no, he's going to be there.
no. I just,
He's
yeah,
got
probably.
he's got a podcast now. He's huge. What's going on?
And so now like we've become friends. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying that's the case always, but like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, dude, you do the right thing, and you do what's the best for you, and if you can, what's best for them, and ultimately, like that's what you have to do, right? And I think you made the right choice, obviously. And like I think I don't know when you sold it, but the market has obviously maybe taken a swing since then. So I think your realtor was probably right on the money.
Oh, dude. Yeah. I mean, it's, Texas is still, going is good, but no, I mean, living and breathing it every day. I'm so happy we sold it when we sold it. But, the other kind of get to that, your previous tenant, who's now your friend's point, I can kind of see why maybe she was a little bit nervous, but I think this is, kind of hats off again to your character and what you do for your friends and your community. But you do give a ton of your time to a lot of people that, I see what you do, like even just working directly with me. You never hesitate to like shoot a quick text. Like you may have a schedule and it's super cram packed with things, but you do convey that to people, and it's a very open, like doors open kind of policy with people. And so I can feel like she probably thought, he is that person, he's very open. And so when she felt like she just dropped the hammer or the anvil on your head, it was like, she's holding this for all these years. And it's like, but you touched on something a second ago, and I do want to get into it because I talked about this with a gentleman yesterday. And I think it's a concept that's definitely ingrained in this show. And the whole name of this is, we built an empire, and whatever that looks like from whatever perspective, no matter how large or small this empire is. I personally do not think that any one person can do it alone. And whether they're, I guess, the figure, the front man of a company or something like that, I do have to always think that somebody was there, whether it's a person, whether it's a support mechanism, whether it's a team. And you touched on a second ago where you said that Marie was very supportive of you taking that risk on the sixplex. And, I think that's a big deal that a lot of people, either they're afraid to kind of talk about, because they've either built up this like sort of false bravado that they got to kind of maintain in the public eye, or even to their friends. But it does sound like, in a very similar fashion, Simone, my wife, she is absolutely grown into my best friend. We just celebrated our 15th anniversary the other day, and I can say it with absolute conviction. Man. She is the only person that I truly, without doubt, can always trust to be there in the highs and lows. And it sounds like you have that with Marie, but I would like to, if you're okay with it, man, just kind of expand on that, because I don't think enough people talk about it, because it's okay to have a support mechanism, and to talk about it, and to put it out there, because I don't think these people that feel that they need to do this solely on their own, I think that they're setting themselves up for a harder road. And I'm not talking necessarily about marriage. I'm just talking about being okay with having that team, being okay with having that support, and or that guidance behind you. So I mean, can you kind of talk about your scenario there?
Yeah. I mean, I think, like, first of all, I mean, Marie and I are the same, man. Like, I cannot say enough about her style and her grace. And like, if you know Marie, like she carries herself with just like grace. Like she's just this sort of smooth person, but she's also like extremely calculated, right? So like, if she's like, I don't know about that one, like I will take way more pause than if she's like, do you trust it or do you like it? Or just like, yeah, I trust you, go for it. Like, it's pretty incredible, her intuition. But even more than that, like it's what you described. Like, she's my best friend and she's like full on partner for life in everything we do. And to have that support, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I absolutely wouldn't be anywhere near where I am now in any part of my life, like professionally, like personally, just, yeah. So like there cannot be enough said about having that partnership. And I'm so glad you brought it up, because I think it's true. Like, people think like, yeah, I'm the face of this or whatever, and so I have to like be strong and I can do it on my own or whatever. And that's total garbage, man. Like, if you see anyone who has any kind of success truly in any place, there's chances are there's someone else helping them, or maybe even a mentor. Like, maybe you don't see them behind the scenes. It's like they've learned from someone else. Like, there's always other people. So to your point, like I could completely agree. It's like, there's always a group, even if you don't think there is. And so to pretend like, yeah, false bravado is perfect. Like to think that you are the one who knows or did, or, is doing. Yeah, I would take a look in the mirror. But I will touch on a little bit other too. Like, one thing I had to get over in general was like, I wanted to buy these like single families, like the sixplex, for example. Like, I had kind of, I don't know, like necessarily, I don't think it was a big head per se, but I was like, I own 11 units and like Marie and I own them together and like we're landlording together. And like, again, I don't think I had like a big head, but in my mind, I was like, I just want to do this on my own. Like I just want to build this wealth for my family. And I can see, 20 years from now when some of these get paid off, like we have some cash for our family to do some cool stuff. So it wasn't necessarily that it was like ego driven, more so than just like, I can do it, we can do it, like just us. And so the shift of like, if I'm going to do multifamily, I mean, we really need a team. Like you just can't do it on your own, really, in my opinion. And so that shift of like, what does that look like? Who do you reach out to? Who do you like, who's doing it? Like, I mean, so that's a hard thing to do, but it's also, I think, harder than people want to talk about, is sort of giving up that, like, I know the market, I know how to creative finance, like whatever it is that you think, there's other people out there doing it too. And so if you want to grow, even if you're buying single families, even if you're buying, or not even, like if you're buying, whatever your game is, right? I'd encourage you to find a partner that works with you and for you, or like, you guys work together, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm really glad you brought it up, because that's super, super valuable in really all parts of life. Is like, you're going to go further, faster with other people for sure.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that's I struggle with that too. I really do try, unfortunately, put a lot of the burden on my shoulders, because in a weird way, I don't want to be a burden on somebody else, and like, even though, like with you, I know that I could call you or text you or email, and within a few minutes or an hour, you're going to respond. But every time, unless it's like truly like friend stuff, like, hey, let's get a beer or something, then I don't care. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to waste Eric's time, see if he wants to go to dinner. But, if it's about something that I feel like I can do myself, I feel at that point like I'm being a burden towards you. And I kind of do that in my life. So it's I think it's a common thread with a lot of people that I've been talking to recently, at least on the podcast, is that, I really wish that, and maybe this is more just self-reflecting, but I think that if more people could get beyond the fact that you're not a burden. Maybe somebody is an asshole and they may make you feel like you're being a burden, but if you've gone through everything that you can do within your knowledge set and you just need to reach out for help, like you're not being a burden. And if that first person that you think you can go to treats you like that, then find the next person, and kind of not really like a self-help type thing, but I do think that people really need to not be afraid to reach out to the next person, because somebody is always going to either have a different angle of viewing something or a different knowledge set that can either help you gain access to learning what they know. But I do think that people realistically have to force themselves to get out of their own heads with things and not be afraid to reach out, so.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'll just say publicly, man, like I love every time you call. Like I've never ever felt like burdened in any way. So I know
Oh,
I'm
sure.
being
No, I
genuine.
know
Like,
you don't.
I know, but like it's true. But even other people, like I can speak for other people who maybe like, maybe you call an appraiser or whatever it is, like someone who maybe has a different skill set or knowledge set than you. Like I'd encourage you, to like get that out of your mind, because really, I think a lot of people actually sort of like being the expert, so to speak.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Or like being helpful. Like one of my favorite things in the world is just be like, let's talk it through. Like let's figure it out. And maybe I know engineering perhaps better, or maybe, whatever it is.
Mhm.
But yeah, like I appreciate your thought on it too. And I don't think it's ever the case I felt burdened or will ever. So yeah, man, I think that's a really good point for people to hear, is like, if you're in that situation where you feel like, do I need to really call that person? Chances are they're totally fine with you calling them,
Yeah.
So that's a really cool tip.
Yeah. You said something to me a long time ago, and I can't remember if it was in the podcast or if it was in person, or you might not have even said it to me, but there was a concept you were talking about, and I can't recall if it was from a book you had read or a podcast you had heard, but you told me something about like when you walk into a room, like you try and service the room. And that, for some weird reason, like that stuck with me. Like I see how you treat people, in person in your life, and you do. And it leads me to the another situation is that, I do think that you carry yourself like that, but I also do believe that at least the members of your family, your immediate family that I know, also carry themselves like that. And that's something that I think a lot of people could gain from in trying to quote unquote service the room. Giving back not only to their community but to their friends, to their family, to their loved ones. And it's like I was just telling somebody the other day. We were talking about some high school stuff, and for some reason it got onto a topic of your mom, and we were discussing, and I was like, oh man, I love her. Like, she's awesome. They're like, do you know her? I was like, well, yeah, I mean, she was my teacher. She was everybody's teacher, but I was like, she was like this person in my life that she helped me like kind of access the creative side of my brain. And I was kind of reading and writing a lot of like weird stuff at that point. And I started writing this book in her class about, it was basically like copying John Sanford's the Prey series. Like it was what would eventually become the TV show Dexter. Like I was pretty much plagiarizing this book, but I hadn't read the Prey series. And so I thought it was really cool. It's a concept, and I started really writing, and she like popped in and read it. And I was like, what do you think? She's like, well, I mean, there's work to be had on it, but I think you're onto something. Like, you should keep going to this. And so it's like, you go through the next 4 months of that class or whatever, and the semester is going to change. But like every time I would see her, she'd be like, how's the book? And it was like, so then if I hadn't worked on it, I'd be like, I haven't touched it, like I want to lie so bad to you right now, Tish, but like I can't. And, but she really pushed me. And so I didn't ever finish the book, but what it did is it got me to where had become, and I'm a little bit, not so much anymore, but I was just a ferocious reader at one point in my life. Like I couldn't get enough. And I think she kind of like ignited again, that whatever side of your brain controls the art aspect of your life. And it took me, into multiple tangents, with music, with drawing, with reading. And I really do, I think about that often, actually. Like it was a tiny sliver. She probably would not even recall it. But for me, it was like, it was huge. It was so small, but it was so very impactful for me, I think, to really start to dive into that side of my brain to become who I am now, And so, I go back to that concept that you said, walk into and service the room. Like, it doesn't matter how small or large servicing the room at that time is. I think that if you can always, or try your best to truly service the room, like you were saying, that it can have such a profound impact on somebody moving forward. Like, and you really, I don't think you really know at that moment, like what you're doing, but it carries mass amounts of weight, like for somebody in their future. So I just wanted to bring up that concept because like you saying that was so small, but it was, again, you and your family are highly impactful on the people they interact with, their communities and the surroundings. And I think it's just awesome that the way that you guys carry yourselves.
Yeah, man. First of all, like, thanks for the kind words. I mean, I feel like you're giving me a little too much praise here on the show, but
No,
like, thanks. I mean, yeah. And here's what's interesting is like, we started this show and one of the first like things we talked about was like people like standing on shoulders, right? Like, I'm so grateful for my parents, and I don't like pretend that I wasn't given the jackpot. You know, like being born in the United States alone is a major jackpot. Being born to supportive parents, being born to like parents who are still together to this day. They just celebrated their 45th anniversary like 3 days ago. Like,
oh, wow.
Wild, right? But like that like upbringing, and then like to your point, my mom was a teacher, right? So like she touched so many lives, and teachers are all like that. Like that, you know, the teachers say stuff and they don't even think about it. Like they're just trying to help someone become a little better, in, you know, in most cases. But it can be huge, right? And so my parents are incredible. I actually ran into Nicole, who's the planning director now for the town of Bayfield, and she used to do City of Durango, and now she's like in her own community. She's amazing. She's extremely talented at what she does. But she worked with my dad for 10 years. And then now that she's in Bayfield, she's working with my mom because my mom's on the planning commission. So I'll say in a small piece, but she was like, I really love working with both your parents. And like, it hit me really hard. Like, wow, that is super cool that both my parents are working in the community that I work in. And she was like, I see your name on plans all the time. Like, keep them coming. Like, that's what she said. And then she's like, and I see your dad's name on stuff because he was the old town attorney, right? So all of that to say is like, the community we have, super, super grateful for. I mean, we can't take back like Bayfield High for whatever it is and for whatever it was. Like that period of time was super special, right? And it's probably special for everyone, but special for us because like all of the stuff that we gained is just, it's just so, so powerful. So coming back to like Serve the Room, I can't take credit for that. It is in a couple books, but I do like try when I walk through a door, this is where it came from. Brendan Burchard talks about this in High Performance Habits. And that's kind of where I stole it from. Like the actual concept of walking through a door. Like, how can I serve? Like who can I serve when you walk into a room? And yeah, I don't mean, obviously I fall short many, many times, but if you can walk into a room as like service, I guarantee you're going to get more out of it than if you walk into the room like, who can help me in this room? You know? So I think that's the concept that I talk about again, is like, yeah, many times I totally blow it, but I think it's a really cool concept in general. Like to come as a servant rather than who can like give me my next deal or whatever, you know?
Sure. No, that's awesome. Yeah. Nicole's going to be on in a few weeks.
Nice. Yeah. She's awesome. Man. She's super smart.
She's amazing. It was funny. So, it was the 4th of July, obviously, and there was some adult beverages had, but I was walking by, you know, and like probably had one foot flop on. And she's like, hey, Kyle, do you want to be on this deal? So we've got a committee that we started here, and it's basically a workshop group for the master plan for Bayfield. And so I'm super excited to be on board with that. But either way, I was, you know, definitely a little bit buzzed. I was not drunk by any means, but she's like, hey, Kyle. And I just gave her like the biggest hug. And I barely know Nicole. Like I've had like 2 meetings with her. They've always gone good. But I can imagine from her being like, that was way random and almost a little bit intrusive. Like, you know, I'm so happy to have her in our community because I really, you know, and I've talked about this, and I do know that I would be the first person to tell people that I am bordering batshit crazy at times with ideas that I have. But I'm a firm believer that like you have to think big, like you have to, and you may not get to the big goal tomorrow, but you have to start to lay the groundwork. And I think a huge advocate for our local, you know, community is Nicole. And so when she hit her up and I was like, would you want to be on the podcast? And she was like, yeah, absolutely. Send me the link, you know? So what I'm hoping to do is with her and a few other, members, is to have kind of a monthly and really start to talk about or recap what was had in last week's meeting or something like that. Because talking to a lot of people in our age group, that, I mean, Bayfield doesn't necessarily do a lot like with their Facebook page or social media. They kind of put all of their data on their town website, because that's just where it's stored. And so a lot of people locally miss things, or they weren't made aware of things. And then inevitably they feel like they're angry, and I've talked to Nicole about this. I was like, we got to do something to make sure that people are aware, and it shouldn't fall on the weight of the town. It's like if somebody's active in their community, like it takes 2 seconds to go to the town of Bayfield.com. I mean, they could find every bit of data, but I would like to have her on to just kind of recap those meetings so that people can see and hear, some of the things that are coming up, or that could be, potentially, positive or negative to their businesses locally. And so I'm excited to have her on in a couple of weeks. I think that she's a really great person to have in our town.
100%, dude. She's an amazing asset for that town. Like, I don't know. I mean, I'll just say, I'll leave it at that. She's an incredible asset. Bayfield's lucky to have her without question. Yeah. So
she was huge in supporting Simone. So I don't know if I've talked to you since about it, but either way, at the Pay It Forward meeting in Denver, we talked about, getting Simone's design company going. And so we pulled the trigger on that, and hopefully she opens up maybe like the 3rd week of September. Nice. And so we've everybody, again, having lived in the trades for, 17 years, like every one of my dear friends was like, dude, I'm booked. Like I cannot even remotely help you. So like all summer has been nights and weekends trying to do the remodeling there ourselves and laying flooring and, and so, but Nicole was a huge advocate for, getting that pushed through. And, it's going to kind of be the first of its kind as far as a true design studio on Mill Street. So we're excited to get that going, but yeah. So, hopefully I don't know that we that target has inevitably just keep, it was like, we're going to open
construction
up
in general, man.
we're going to be open and have like a champagne christener for the 4th of July. And it was like, no, we're not. We're so, 4th of July. Yeah.
4th of July 23. It's going to be sweet.
Yeah. So, we'll have to have you guys out though, because we really do want to kind of have a soft opening with friends and family. So, but
love it. That's awesome. Congrats.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what's on the horizon for you? I mean, I guess beyond the multifamily investment, like, what do you have coming up that's driving you right now? Like what's getting you excited?
Yeah. So like, a couple of things. So speaking of big goals, is Marie and I have like made this goal to say like every summer we want to live somewhere else. And that sounds kind of crazy to a lot of people, but we've set the wheels in motion. So next year, we'll fly to Italy with my family. My mom's like being super generous. So she's buying our flights. We're all going to fly together, stay like 5 days in a house. And then she was just like, if you guys want to travel Europe, whatever you want to do, I just wanted to get you guys there. And it's incredibly generous. So we're going to go there, and then we're going to make our way to Barcelona and live there next summer.
Oh, wow.
And that's tough because I do engineering still. So that's a pretty hard time to take off. But we're like, you know what? Like our kids are only young once. The summertime thing is kind of like super fun for them. And they're still young. Like they're not doing like tons of baseball and all the other stuff that will come. Right. So we're like, for the next 4 or 5 years, we're going to try and be somewhere else every summer. And luckily things are more digital than they've ever been. Like you can do a ton of work from anywhere really. And so that's kind of got me excited, is like, we said we wanted to travel more. We said we wanted to like show our kids parts of the world that maybe we've seen or maybe haven't, and see different cultures, languages, all the stuff. And so we're like setting the wheels in motion. So as of right now, I mean, that's looking like next summer we'll be in Spain and cruising around from there. So that's like one thing that I'm going to obviously make less money, but I don't care. I mean, I've never really honestly put a huge value on money other than it's a major tool for this type of thing. Sure. So that's what's got me kind of jazzed lately.
Yeah. Money in the bank is, sometimes seems to take time away from what you care about. Oddly enough, like to do some of the things you need money, but it is a tool.
Well, you lose sight of the reason you started going for it.
Yeah.
Like for me, I think travel and time with family is like so important that I was always like, okay, I'm going to chase wealth and maybe like passive cash flow so I can spend more time with family and travel, right? But then you start like getting into this hamster wheel like you're describing. It's like it's never enough. There really is never enough for most people. And I'm grateful that me and Marie kind of see eye to eye where it's like, you know what? Like at any given time, we could honestly like quit and live in Mexico for 4 months and on very little and be super, super happy and genuinely mean it, you know? And I think like, again, back to your concept about like a partner is like, I honestly believe Marie would do that with me and our family and be super jazzed to do it. So like people, you kind of have to have the real conversations. Like, is that actually a thing? Because that, or be honest about money. Because some people just love money, and love like, and that's fine. Good on them, right? Like, I don't want to judge anyone. So if you like money, just be honest. I like more money. I like fast cars. I like big house, whatever, right? And if that's your reasoning for going after it, good for you. That's just not mine. And so to kind of come full circle to your question is like, we had a good hard look at our goals, good hard look at what's the most important, and then how do you make that happen? Like what are the steps we need to take between now and then to do what we said we were going to do? And so more important than like actually doing it maybe is like doing what we said we were going to do and what was the most important to us. So that's got me pretty pumped at the moment.
That's awesome. Yeah. It was crazy. I think, a lot of people feel like that time is indefinite, right? That it's hard to realistically look at the concept, and you hear it all the time of like, you could be gone tomorrow, but I talked to this guy yesterday and it was the craziest story. But he was in a conference like 2 hours from the house. He he puts up a post on Facebook, and his brother's best or like favorite show was Family Guy. And so he's like, dude, this guy at this conference looks exactly like Peter Griffin. And so his brother texts, he's like, dude, take a photo. So, or puts on Facebook, like, take a photo. He's like, all right, give me a minute, dude. It's like kind of awkward. So goes back. It's like 3 hours later, they're at lunch or whatever, takes a photo of the guy. No, 3 hours. Geez, 30 minutes later, they go break for lunch, takes a photo of the guy, puts it up. And then he notices his brother doesn't comment. And so he's like, no big deal, whatever. It's Facebook. He's at work or whatever. And so he starts getting blown up on his actual cell phone by his brother's wife. And it was like, call, text. And she's like 911, 911. So he steps out and calls. His brother in that time frame had passed away from an immediate massive heart attack.
Oh my gosh. So
like their last communication was a joke text or a joke Facebook comment. So, I mean, that's such a, once in a lifetime scenario, but it does really bring the concept of, you can chase after money, but time is always coming and you don't know when it's going to end. So it's like, if you have these dreams and desires, like you may not have the money, but do something, like, cause you're not going to get that time back, and it truly can be gone in a moment's notice.
That's a really tough story, right? But like the lesson is there. You're right. Like, it's not guaranteed at all.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I don't subscribe to like quit your job, go live on a beach necessarily, but like, I mean, maybe again, if that's your thing, like,
sure.
But like between your commitments, like, take the time. So, I mean, you mentioned like, I do have what I'll call like a busy schedule. Mm-hmm. But I've worked really, really hard in the last year to basically draw some pretty hard lines. Like from 6 p.m. on, I'm pretty hard to reach.
Yeah.
And like the weekends I don't work, non-negotiable, unless there's like a closing on Monday or something, right? Like just pretty much non-negotiable nights and weekends. And that was sort of hard for me to set because I was doing podcasts and webinars and all kinds of stuff in the evenings only. Mm-hmm. And I've since pushed those to the day. I'm like, all right, so for now, like if you look at my Calendly, it's Tuesdays, like literally all the way down from now till the end of time. If you want to pick a time to be on the podcast, if you want to pick a time to talk, whatever, you'll see it on Tuesday. And that's the day that I pushed all Zoom meetings because I want to be home with my kids at night. And that's just one example of like, again, honoring what I said I wanted to be and what I like find valuable. I think I don't necessarily know if I lost sight of it, because here's another thing with Marie is like when I told her I was going to start Wild Oak Capital, which is like our syndication company, she was like, I know you. Like, I know if you're going to do something, you're going to go all in. Like, you're not going to like quit after a month. Right. So she's like, what does that mean? What does that mean for our family? What does that mean for us? And I was like, probably what it means is for the next year, I'm going to be homeless. Are you okay with that? And if you're not, I'm not going to do this. And this was a really powerful conversation. And she's like, yeah, I got you. She's like, let's call it 2 years. You know, kids are super young. They probably won't remember. Like, you obviously need to be around the weekends and stuff, but like, I got you on the evenings and stuff. And so that was like a pretty monumental shift for me. It was like, all right, cool. I just opened up some more time in my life where I can jam what I'll call this side project. And that was super powerful. And I don't mean to brag, but the point of the story is like, again, coming full circle to like, what do you find value in? What do you say that means value to you? And then to your point, like, time's fleeting, man. Like, you got to focus on that thing that you are chasing after. Otherwise, that you may never like take that vacation. You may never switch jobs, all this stuff. And if you listen to the episode you were on, Kyle, you've got some really crazy, like, your story is incredible and inspiring. There's times when you took just crazy leaps, dude. Like, I'll never forget that story of how you talked to our mutual friend and he's like, dude, just be a real estate agent.
Sure.
And he just kind of did, like, just like that leap was incredible. And now, like, I'm sure looking back, like, you're obviously glad you did, I would imagine, but just the point of like, hey, what's important to you? You're sitting in this, like, I'm guessing pretty shitty hotel room in like Montana or wherever it was. And then you're like, all right, I value my family more than money. And so, you're a testament to that as well.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was just talking to Simone about it because it has been crazy. And I'm very much similar to you. Like, if I do something, I'm going 110%. So Simone asked me, I don't say this negatively. But historically within our marriage, I have always made more money. I was the breadwinner in our family. And so when I came back, I didn't make any money for 6 months. I was a brand new real estate agent. Like, you just simply do not make money. If somebody's telling you you're going to come in and just slay it, they are lying to you. But I didn't make any money. So she was literally the breadwinner. But part of that was that I kind of had a mental shift of you have to support your partner who has always supported you in their dreams, no matter whether you think that they're crazy dreams or if you truly believe in, you need to at times be that rock for the other side of the partnership. And so she asked me, she believes in the podcast. She knows that I'll go 100% in it. She believes in me in real estate. Like, she believes in me as a father, but she asked me with all of her heart, can you please not do the podcast until I am done with this final stage of my degree? And I was like, yes. How long but me being me, I'm like, how long is that going to take you? So, but
yes, but when?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. But is that 3 years or, cause I want to do this, and so she did, she's hustled, she's got through it. But part of that was I'm glad that she asked me that wholeheartedly because it made myself focus on her dreams. Like, the dream of her having her own studio, I know that she will be successful. It may not be what someone would experience success for, on a main avenue of a New York City, studio, but to her, it will have a level of success. And so I had to really shift gears and be that support mechanism for her. And I'm so proud to see her, succeed. But I was just asking her the other day before the first episode, I was like, what do you think about this real estate gig? Cause I've gotten really busy, and I've been focused on it and I work it like it's a 9 to 5. And a lot of time it is 10 o'clock phone calls to clients that are just fucking unruly, excuse my language, but it's just like, this is beyond cool at this moment. Like, why are we talking about something at this hour when we could clearly, but I'm trying to build my brand. I'm trying to build relationships with buyers and sellers, with other brokers. And so I am working it hard. And I was like, she will be the person, like, you got to take a break. But we talked about it the other day and I'm like, what do you think? She's like, it's wild and crazy, but you know what? This is the first time in 15 years that we have ever taken a vacation. And she's like, we've taken 5 vacations this summer. You know, like we didn't like fly to Guam or something ridiculous, but like we went camping. We went to Tahoe for 5 days. Like we decided to drive versus fly so we could stop in Utah and Moab. And like we spent time with each other. So she's like, yeah, are you insanely busy? You're probably more busy now than when you owned your own company, but somehow you find time to make it make sense. Like you don't give up days to not take the kids to practice for soccer or gymnastics. Like you won't do anything if there's a tournament, you know, like, and we're taking vacation. So it's, again, it comes back to your comments of like, define what your goals are and define what's most important to you. And if you have to, unfortunately, work really, really hard on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you know, just have that conversation. Be like, look, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday are going to suck. And I'm going to be almost unreachable, but I promise you, I will be there Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you know, and it's, it can be rewarding. But like you say, I really don't want to, I think your episode was probably the one and only time I'll really just go ham bone on my ridiculous long-winded story. But, you know, it took me a lot of failure to be like, this is actually the most important thing to me, and screw the money, you know, screw the desire to have, you know, millions of dollars, or, you know, it's just not, it is not worth it at the end of the day to me. If it is to somebody else, then my hat's off to them. But, you know, so, well, I'm happy to see you travel more, because I feel, I was just talking in my head before this episode, and I was like, dude, Eric, I feel like he does so much. Like, does he ever sleep? So it's really good to hear that, like, you've set the line in the sand. Like you're like, this is it. This is, and you've got the teams, you got the systems in place. You're building this empire, for lack of better terms, but you worked your ass off to get to this point where you can say, this is it. Like, these are the times in which I will allow the outside world to affect what I care most about. And it's really awesome to see that, and something that I think a lot of us could try and emulate, because I think it holds massive value that maybe you don't see day one, but your kids learn from it. They see how you interact, and it has huge rewards that maybe pay dividends, but not necessarily in the bank account.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And I think, to your point, man, it's like, again, I appreciate the kind words. Like, yeah, I mean, I have a lot on my plate at the moment, but I think it's, you know, it's a team, right? So like there's 4 of us, and then I now have 2 assistants, and like, I would encourage anyone, if they're feeling super, super busy, to find a really good person to help you. And early on, honestly, I couldn't afford her. Like, Wild Oak didn't make any money. You don't make any money until basically a first property sells. You really don't make a lot of money in syndication. So like, you have to kind of fund this business, let's say. And so to hire an assistant at a period of time where we were losing money was just nonsense. Yeah. But it's the best thing I ever did. Like, she's amazing. Now I have a second one who's helping with like a little bit easier tasks, let's say. But all that to say is, like, it's definitely a group effort. But I will say, like, it took a lot of energy and time, and specific, like, this is what's important, and this is the time that's important to me. So yeah, I mean, I really treasure that about you too, dude. Like, you spend time with your family, and you're right. You're probably not going to miss a whole lot of games and stuff, even if it means perhaps losing a new client. Like, that type of stuff's it's just more valuable over time.
Sure. Absolutely. So, I'm curious, and this is just me asking about your goals, but, you know, I do know, I don't think by any means that you hate your quote unquote day job, right? Your engineering job, the company that you own. But, you know, just for me kind of being a fanboy, like, do you have what would your dream be like? I mean, does it look like, will you always continue to do engineering work? Like, do you love it like you used to? Or do you think that do you want to step away from that at some point?
I think, you know, it's funny. Like, I like weird stuff with engineering. Like, part of the stuff I like is being connected to the community. So in running into Nicole was like oddly cool, because we talked about literally every development that's coming to Bayfield. We're sitting there at Grassburger, and my son's rolling his eyes, you know, it's like playing with his car on the table, and I'm like talking about the new developments coming in Bayfield. But the point to say is, like, to be in this community is valuable for me. And so what I suspect I'll do, I think I kind of see the question that you're asking is like, what I'd really love to do is only septics. I could make a decent living just doing septics. And what it does is it keeps me connected with most contractors in town. Mm-hmm. Definitely all the excavators and the health department. It keeps me in tune with new developments coming in, kind of keeps me in tune with like, I don't know, just like plugged in the community. And it's odd to say that septics are my favorite thing, but they absolutely are. And there's many reasons why, but one is just like, it's a pretty important thing for someone, it's like an important piece of their house to have like good wastewater.
Sure.
And I get to go to the site. I get to like hang out with the contractor for an hour, get to design this thing. And then honestly, I'm like kind of on with my day. Like they're pretty in and out in a sense. And so, I've basically quit doing planning work because it's like, it can be a little soul sucking a little bit. Like it's years and years of effort. And, to be totally fair, the development we did in Bayfield was the first one in a very long time, first large scale development since really Dove Ranch, which is like 20 years ago.
Sure.
So I would like to think that by doing the planning work and doing all the meetings, we sort of set the stage for what Bayfield is experiencing now. And we got major pushback, dude. Like friends from high school were like, meet me in the parking lot and just say like super mean stuff. And I'm not exaggerating. Like it was weird. Like I was like, what? I don't understand. Like people were like attacking me personally because I was like taking away their like Fox field or whatever, And I'm not, so all that to say, I think I will continue to do engineering probably for the next 5 to 8 years. And maybe longer, but if it'll probably just phase back to just doing like septics or something like that. Cause my heart's definitely more in real estate for sure. I think people who like get bit by the bug, like I expect you probably have as well. It's like, it's a really cool field, man. It's really neat. It's fun to see what people can do with a house, what people can do with a new empty lot. Like, I don't know. And plus I just love multifamily in general. So like we focus there, but I love real estate. And so it'll be my focus moving forward, probably 5 to 8 years from now. I probably won't be doing much engineering anymore.
That's good, man. I think that's a pretty solid goal. It seems attainable.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like a Kyle goal, which is like, I want to make $17 million
but I think, dude,
next week.
But I think like, that's what I love about you so much is you set these huge goals and they do say the best goals are ones you don't quite achieve.
Sure. I have to set them like that.
Like if you're setting a goal that's like super achievable, it's like, you're probably not reaching high enough.
Oh yeah.
And the reason that I even say that far, like if I hated engineering, I'd be like 2 years I'm out or 18 months and I'm out, and lots of people do. They hate their daily job, but I don't. I like it. I'm blessed to say I still enjoy it. And so I'm not really like kicking out the door. I'm not like, can't wait to be done with this. It's kind of the opposite is like, how long can I sustain doing both while still doing a good job at both? And I think the answer is quite a while because multifamily is like goes in waves.
Sure.
Like when we get one under contract, there's like 60 days of serious due diligence and I'm traveling to the site and, we're just like tons and tons of underwriting, all this stuff. But then once you purchase it, like you kind of just have to set the wheels in motion and like give the tools to the property manager that they need. And then we have a weekly call. And if something comes up, of course, like, you got to help, right? But typically speaking, it's not that much energy once the property is purchased.
Sure.
It's the 6 months and then specifically the 60 days leading into that. So it'll just depend on how fast we grow too. And I don't think any of us are in a huge rush either. That's the cool thing is like our team that we've built, all four of us still have our day jobs. And so no one's like desperate for a deal. And that's pretty awesome because the next deal we find, it's great. But only if it works for us.
Exactly. I mean, and kind of add to that, like to build, generational, quote unquote, generational wealth, right? Or the systems and practices that you could potentially hand off to, your children and their children. Like that doesn't happen overnight, right? It's like that's not something that, you guys have had a great immediate success. And I shouldn't say immediate, like it's been years in the making, but I do think that for anybody that's listening to this, like that's trying to, potentially get to that level or even reach where you're at now. Like it doesn't happen overnight. and you shouldn't be discouraged, I think is what I would like to say more is like, don't be discouraged if you don't hit your goals. Like if you don't hit that milestone, like just brush it off and keep moving,
Yeah, there was a guy who was on our podcast. It was interesting. This is one that Ben did without me. So I was, my son was sick or whatever, I had to miss it. So Ben interviewed this guy, and what he said was, so Ben asked him what like a mistake that he made. And he was like, well, I was turning 30. I think he was saying I was turning 30 and I wanted to have 10 rentals by the time I was 30. So I just bought this crappy house because I wanted to reach the goal. and he's like, I should have just never done that. I should have just been like, I got close, He's like, so sometimes goals can be that like almost a distraction, or maybe like mistakes can be made, but he probably would have never got to 9 without the goal of 10.
Sure.
So like, yeah. And I mean, to your point, so that's really like my whole goal behind all of this, like personally, and I know you didn't ask this question, but I'll just jump into this, is like build generational wealth. Sure. And I think, at this point there's probably some there, but more so is just time, like build more time with my family. And the wealth is honestly like a bonus maybe. And so real estate tends to be that way. Like it's a get rich slow game. Like it'll sneak up on you, dude. Like that, I was telling you that house in Fort Worth we bought around when Elliot was born. So 5 years ago, and I bought it for like 142.5, I think. Mm-hmm. And now it's worth around 300 grand. And I haven't done anything, literally nothing. It was a turnkey property when we bought it. And so we are super good landlords. Like our manager knows, like if something's broke, fix it right.
Yeah.
You don't even have to call. Like I trust you. And it's been a cash flowing asset. So I literally make money every single month. And we probably have 150 grand in equity. And I didn't really do much. I flew there one time. I inspected it once. We just happened to have a little cash from the sale of a property. And that's kind of how real estate sneaks up on you. Like you buy something, and if you have the capacity and ability to hold it, you'll be surprised at the wealth you can build. And that's what's so cool about it.
Yeah, it is definitely a long-term play. That I think I talked about it on your episode, but that gentleman I used to work for, he's the random billionaire that you'll never know is a billionaire because he shows up in, Levi Strauss and smoking whatever primetime cigars. That's there's this guy, and you're like, what the hell is this dude doing? But we started to see a huge downturn in the oil and gas industry, and he had just bought this building. And I was like, oh man, we probably need to, divest all this and sell this thing and get you that. He's like, no, we're not selling that. I was like, well, I mean, and at that point, I think maybe I had bought like a condo, I had tenants in it, was making money, but he's like, he said that to me, and he was just like, dude, do not ever buy a piece of real estate unless you can plan to hold it for 15 to 30 years. Like, just don't. And like that stuck with me, and it really does ring true. It's like, if, I think that unfortunately during COVID, a lot of people saw this huge appreciation of their assets. And so I hope that a lot of people don't build bad habits out of it, because if you buy a house tomorrow, next year, you will not make 100 grand. Like that's not the reality of the world. And so hopefully people that had really great immediate success do not build into those habits, because it is a long-term play. So
no doubt.
Well, Eric, man, thank you so much for being on the show. Like, honestly, this was a pleasure to have you on, and I kind of probably nerded out and fanboyed a little bit, but I'm really appreciative for everything you've done for me. I do thank you. And if somebody wants to reach out to you for, whether it be for, investment strategies, guidance, coaching, social, how can everybody reach out to you? Do you have a handle that you want us to plug?
Yeah, I think, pretty much everything's at wildoakcapital.com. The podcast is there. Yeah, you can book a call with me. And, I really do love to talk. Like, I really love to talk to people and like talk about real estate. And yeah, so if you reach out, know that I'll respond for sure. And it's my pleasure too. And then Kyle, like, honestly, this has been my honor, dude. This is really cool. I'm like, so cool. We've been texting about this podcast for a while, and I've been jazzed to watch it like come to life. And you like, your studio looks amazing, and I just love your style. Like, I can't wait to be, I'm gonna be a huge listener. So anyway, thanks for having me on. Yeah, no, absolutely. Appreciate you, Eric. We'll see you around. Okay. Sounds good. Thanks.
Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn.